All right. Once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. And this is the April meeting of the ANC 3C Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. I am Chanel Pagets, the commissioner from 3C03 and one of the co-chairs of this committee. Tammy Gordon is the other co-chair. Unfortunately, she will be unable to join us this evening, but I'm sure she will watch the entire recording. Again, we are recording this meeting and we will be posting it to the 3C YouTube channel once it is available. So we will kick right off. I believe we do have all of our committee members here that are the community committee members, as well as a number of commissioners. We do not require quorum at these meetings. No decisions are made at these meetings. This is a standing committee to be able to, discuss the items that we've placed on the agenda so that they can have thorough thought and consideration prior to any discussion at our regularly noticed public meetings where we are able to vote and make decisions. So with that, we have 3 items on our agenda this evening. There is the discussion of accessory dwelling unit zoning reform. Accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs. There is a draft resolution available on our site, and I will post a link to that now. Additionally, we have a discussion of historic district demographics, which I believe Commissioner Siddiqui Swaleh will be posting an updated resolution when that discussion comes around. And we also will be beginning the discussion of the future of the Cleveland Park service lane with a resolution anticipated in May. This is going to provide ample time for community input regarding the future use of the service lane that's currently under construction. With that, we will get started with the ADU accessory dwelling unit zoning reform draft. Just a matter of some background on this. The zoning rewrite of 2016 allowed for accessory dwelling units as a matter of right in most R zones, subject to certain requirements. However, the production of ADUs since 2016 has been limited. And we definitely need this housing production across DC, especially in high opportunity areas like Ward 3. There have been surveys of adults who would consider creating an ADU, and you can find all of this information along with citations in the draft resolution. But ADUs do offer opportunities to make homeownership more affordable for buyers and across both young families looking for a starter home and also aging in place by being able to generate income from rental and also downsizing to living in these properties. So you can go through the other whereas or the additional whereases that we have in this document. But what we are asking for in the therefores, we are urging the Office of Planning to develop amendments to the DC zoning regulations that would revise the 450 square foot footprint limit for an accessory building used for a dwelling to permit up to 650 square feet, eliminate the owner occupancy requirement in the R zones, permit the cellar basement accessory apartments to use the full footprint of the principal dwelling, even if the size of the accessory unit exceeds 35% of the gross square footage of the principal dwelling, eliminate the parking replacement requirements, eliminate the 5-year delay for construction and occupancy of a second dwelling in an accessory building in residential flat zones, and lift the regulations on third units in the residential flat zones. With that, I believe we will open this up for discussion, starting with any comments from committee members or commissioners who are de facto committee members. So if you could raise your virtual hand, raise your hand so I can see it. All right, Mr. Goodman, John, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. A bit of background. I was on a zoning rewrite task force that OP put together that ended up with the the rules that we now have, and the task force and OP had recommended ADU rules that were a lot looser than what we have now. And it was as a result of the public comment, primarily at the zoning commission and elsewhere, that other things got tightened up. Is there anything in particular that you can point to? When I say you, I mean anybody can point to suggest that these items in the rules are the things that have caused there to be an underproduction of ADUs? I mean, has anybody done any studies or surveys or anecdotal stories about, the 600, out of 450 being too small, the ground floor problem being an issue in real life?
We would have to pull the exact numbers of if those exist. I know that there's the 5-year limit in Williamsport that tends to unnecessarily and arbitrarily restrict the ability to construct and occupy these buildings. There's also a lot of confusion with the rules, and all of this too leads to costs and delaying things. Commissioner Siddiqui, you look like you had your hand up, or Swale, in response to this.
Yeah, there are some data and surveys cited in the resolution. For example, AARP says that owner occupancy requirements limit production of ADUs, and so that's one of the ones that that's sort of in the resolution. And there's some other surveys, and again, I just opened this up, but there are links to some, and we could pull out. There are already some stuff that's pulled out over here, but we could pull out more stuff if needed.
Is that specific to DC, or is the AARP survey nationwide and general?
Well, let's look at the survey. I believe it's a nationwide survey.
Yeah. Okay.
But
I was just trying to figure out if there was something concrete to point to in what has happened in the whatever it's been now 5 years with these rules have been on the books to say we have some evidence to show that this has been a problem.
Bob?
Thanks. So I'm sure there's lots of reasons from financing to others of why the production of ADUs hasn't taken off. I think it hasn't taken off. I mean, I did a count of ADUs in ANC 3C over the last 4 or 5 years. There's been 10 built. And that includes not just backyard cottages, but basement units as well, out of an area that has approximately 2,000 residential units in it. So I mean, they're not being produced in a significant way. I'm not sure what a significant way is either, by the way, but I think 10 is probably not it. The Coalition for Smarter Growth authored a lot of these provisions, and there were more that I don't think are relevant to ANC 3C. But for example, on the square footage requirement, they have done an analysis to say that that size of a footprint is hard to maneuver for accessibility reasons. So if you're going to age in place and you're going to downsize, the 650 square foot footprint would allow for more maneuverability on both a first, and if there's a second floor as well. So that, I mean, I think that's one example of what we want to sort of solve for what is a known problem. I'd say on that one, even though it increases the allowable footprint from 450 square feet to 650 square feet, it doesn't change your lot occupancy. So you need to have the space to do that on your lot, depending on what your R zone is.
Rick?
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks. Yeah, I had sort of a similar question to Mr. Goodman's, which is, how the numbers were chosen, say from 450, which is what the zoning commission decided on in 2016 and how the experience since then informs what is recommended here. And I guess what I'm hearing is those are the numbers in the Coalition for Smarter Growth memo. So, you know, I put out something on the listserv asking for comments on this, and I've had a few, and so far they, you know, on size, they tend to vary. One consistent theme I have heard, though, is concern about lifting requirement that a property owner occupy the principal residence or a residence on the lot while renting an ADU. There's concern that lifting that could result in, you know, more owner investors who, you know, are managing properties remotely rather than living close to the properties. And while it is true that one can invest in a house and rent out a house, those tend to be single properties rather than a you know, sort of multiple units on the same property. So just sharing that, changing that requirement in particular is something that I've been hearing concerns about.
And it would be helpful if you could provide any kind of anecdotal studies on that as well. To see.
Yeah, and you know, but I know it was something that was considered several years ago, you know, when the zoning commission made the decision to liberalize ADU requirements so that they were matter of right, subject to these limitations.
Adam?
I just want to say quickly on the square footage issue. Many of the new constructions in Navy Yard are 450 square feet for a 1-bedroom, and I am a single person with a dog, and I can barely function in 450 square feet. So I would implore anybody to go and tour one of those new constructions and tell me if they could function in a space that's that small.
I'm sorry, Bob, I'm calling Tom since he didn't go yet on the committee and commissioners. Tom?
Thank you, Janelle. Yeah, I just wanted to know, I mean, I was an AU student some years back, and toward the end of my years there, I was looking for some housing. And I lived actually in an apartment that was smaller than 450 feet. And I'll tell you, it is not an easy thing to do. I mean, we were probably around 400 or so, a little studio there. It was not easy at all. The other thing I'll mention is part of the reason I actually ended up living out in Rhode Island Avenue when I did this. And part of the reason for that was because there wasn't housing options for me here in Northwest. You know, I wanted to stay either in Townleytown or Van Ness or Cleveland Park as close as I could get to the university. And there just weren't housing options for me out here that I could afford. So I think increasing the supply here as you know, as I think that this would do, you know, making it easier to create these ADUs would be a really great thing, and allow, you know, people to move in closer to their families, which could free up other apartments or other units nearby. Overall, increasing that supply, I think would have a great benefit for people who want to move into our neighborhood and currently can't.
Great, thank you. I would like to open this up for public comment. So Bob, if you have something like pressing that's quick to add, or we can come back around at the end of this discussion. Keeping in mind that this is not the only opportunity that the public has to comment on this, and we will be accepting any and all comments via email between now and the commission meeting. And in the interest of getting to all of our agenda items, we're going to ask that comments be kept to 90 seconds or less. And Commissioner Siddiqui looks like he's got his timer already. So Layla, if you want to unmute and go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. A couple of thoughts. I know of 2 ADUs that are being constructed in Cleveland Park at the moment, and both of them are being planned for Airbnbs. So that's a concern that I have, that if we're trying to increase housing, we're really just adding kind of competition for hotels. So that's one thought, and I don't know what the numbers are there. The other is, has there been any studies of the effect on infrastructure, sewage, water, electrical? I don't know about schooling because those might be small. There might not be children in those units, but that's something else that has come to mind as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Max Smith.
Hi. So I wanted to address one thing Mr. Nash asked about, which was the kind of owner occupancy and other things. So I actually, we now own in the historic district, but 10 years ago I was Betty, sorry. 10 years ago I was renting a basement apartment in a in the historic district also. And it was very hard to do because in order to get around some of the requirements and regulations, the owner would only rent the entire house. And so you had to sublet different parts of the house through one person who would be the have the whole lease. And so there are ways around those things. And I think as the people living in that house, we were certainly in the community, but it was much more beneficial to me to have my own space. I had the basement and other people shared the upstairs. And so I'm not so sure. I mean, for the people who are very interested in it, there are ways around these things. And for me, it was very important to be able to live at that time close to work and in a neighborhood I wanted to live in. And so having that option was something that allowed that to happen. And, if you rent out the whole property and you just sublet things there, again, I don't know if that's actually technically okay, but that's what was done. And I'm hoping I'm 10 years beyond the statute of limitations. I'm not in trouble, but I just, again, I'm not saying it was right or anything, but it was nice to have that option to be able to be in that neighborhood. And now as I started back and when I'd returned to DC and was in the neighborhood, I've now been here and been around for that entire time.
Max, we're at 90 seconds now.
So I would just say it's a great option and I hope it continues to be an option.
Thank you. Barb?
Oops. Hi. Thanks very much. I'm really just starting to get up to speed on this issue. We haven't had a chance to really kind of engage with the board, little in the membership yet, so I don't have a view. But I did have a question, which seems kind of key. It sounds like the idea here is to have a meaningful way to increase housing in the neighborhood. On the other hand, if it gets to be a significant contribution to housing, then these issues about resources and stuff kind of kick in. So I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of do some evaluation of that issue to really figure out what the likely progress is on this, and whether we can kind of stay ahead of the issues in terms of needs for infrastructure or anything else in light of how it progresses. So I don't know if that's something you guys are already looking into, but it seems like an important thing to understand better. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Bob brought up how many, possible potential units there could be for this it's about 2,000. Keeping in mind that as soon as, any kind of regulation change, not everybody is going to go and do this, and each property would be individually permitted. And when that happens, the infrastructure, concerns and all of those things would surface, right? So that's where that backstop is on that. You can't just, say we can't do this at all because of that concern,
So initially, it could be stepwise, one against the others, the way you're sort of seeing it.
Yeah, again, this is how things get permitted in the district. That's always taken into account.
And sorry, Jill, just one other quick thing, since that was quick. The pricing, what I've heard, at least preliminarily, is a big issue with this. Just it's very expensive to build these things, like $500,000 per unit. I don't know if that's an accurate number, but is that something that can actually be adjusted? Bob's shaking his head, so maybe that's not a true number, but we were looking into having an event about this, and that's sort of what we'd heard. So I'm just curious if that's a practical issue, and there's any way to kind of address that to help owners trying to do ADUs. Thanks again.
Yep, thank you. Keith?
I'm coming. Trying to get video on. Hey. So my comment on this is less of a question, more of a comment, which is that I last week decided that it might be a good idea to put up an ADU in my backyard. So I reached out to Rick, who's my ANC, and we had a good chat about it. But I guess more broadly speaking, I'd be happy to volunteer my experiences with the group as we progress forward, because basically I'm looking at it as something that I'm evaluating. So as I go through the process and understand like what I'm going up against, I'm happy to kind of share that with the group. And to answer, I think Bar's question, I did get like a very loose quote for putting up a small studio ADU in the backyard, and it was like 200K. But that's only single level, like 300-ish square foot little unit. So the intent for me would be more on like family member, in-law suite / au pair suite, and less for the like Airbnb rental, but basically just giving us more space. So putting that out there for anyone who wants to collaborate / give me money for an ADU.
Well pitched. Thank you. Does anyone else from the public have comments, questions? All right, back to you, Bob. Oh, it looks like actually
Margaret has a question. Go.
Okay. Margaret?
My son built an ADU on his relatively small lot in California. He was in San Diego County, and they had a program where the county would provide the plans and streamline the process. It was very specific to what was allowed on the lot, but it made it much easier for him. He didn't have to go find, he could just use the plan that the county offered.
Yes, I actually heard about that. It's very interesting and a different approach to going about it. It's very exciting. All right, Bob?
Yeah, thanks. Just real quick. Actually, I think DC is either has or is working on a program similar to what Margaret just mentioned. I mean, on the infrastructure point, you know, you're not getting added building envelope for your lot. And so if you put on an addition to your lot, I mean, the same infrastructure concerns occur. And so saying that this would be a problem for an ADU and wouldn't be a problem for people adding onto their house and, you know, consuming more space in their house and presumably having more people in their house, I don't think it'd be any different. I would like to hear more at some point about this concern about owner occupancy, because I just don't understand it that well. I can rent my house to whoever I want. My neighbors don't have any say in that. I don't see how this is really any different. And then what was the last point? Oh, I forget, but in the interest of time, we have more time to talk about this in the weeks to come.
Yeah. Also with the Airbnbs, I jotted that down. Those would still need to go through. It's not, is it Department of Buildings or the new DCRA, the other DCRA? But those would still need to be licensed, is what I'm saying. And
they're heavily restricted in DC.
Yeah.
But you know, even it doesn't provide housing, but it does provide income. So it does make a house more affordable to someone. And that doesn't have to be an always thing. It could be a temporary thing where they're making money and then, you know, decide to downsize into it or something like that.
Okay. Bonnie, did you want to speak on this?
Just really quickly to Bob's point, sure, we could all people could rent out their houses, but if it's more of if you have the opportunity to build what really is essentially kind of 3 units across the house or in the backyard and addition and underneath, maybe like if you count the basement 4, then I do actually see maybe developers or speculators or, you know, land speculators just sort of thinking, oh, this is a great idea. Let's go buy this property and I don't have to live there. I don't have any residential occupancy. I can go buy this property and make this just an investment situation where I can put 4 different, you know, groups of people in. So that I think is a little different.
But good or bad?
I guess I'm thinking that, you know, is this the precursor that you're going to start doing away with single family housing, you know, zoning?
Well, I mean, you can already, I mean, so I don't know about the 3 or the 4, and that would be a zoning issue, but this is 2. I guess in an RF zone, it would be 3. I think I guess what I'm asking is if the purpose of this, like the premise, is to generate more of these to get more housing, does the incentivization of creating that, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's what I'm wondering.
I don't need to go back and forth either. I just, don't you worry about absentee landlords and people that don't care about the neighborhood and just, I don't know, the end of the neighborhood, I guess. I don't know. I won't take up any more time.
Okay, Pascal?
Yeah, I actually sort of agree with Bonnie a little bit. I mean, I do think there's it does this does have sort of a feel like a developer push to me, but my real question is, we got 2,000 housing units. How much pressure is coming from those 2,000 people to want to be able to do this?
I don't know that we can answer that because
Well, I hear a lot of pressure from people, I'd like to live here, all that other stuff, but you got to own something to build an ADU. And you got to live here. And there's also a quality of life issue to some degree that, excuse me, that people sort of, they are what they are. So I see, I hear a lot of, what all these people are pushing, but I want to know how many of those 2,000 dwelling unit owners are actually pushing for any of this, any of it.
I'll quickly jump in, Mr. Luck. Thank you for your comment. I mean, no one's forcing anyone to build anything here. And if we're only relaxing the constraints for those that do. And so of the 2,000, if neither of them want to build it, no one's going to force them to do it.
No, I know, but there is some guy decides they're going to sell a house next to me and suddenly it's a triplex. It changes my life.
This is not going to be a triplex.
Well, I hear you, but I mean, I hear the AARP, I hear all sorts of stuff and I go, ask the 2,000 people that live here whether this is good or bad, as opposed to everyone else that wants to build some kind of ADU on my property.
That's what the ANC is. Yeah,
I get it, but then I'd like to just hear it as well, as opposed to there's always some broader group of something to do something. Why don't you also canvass the folks that are impacted by this? That's my recommendation.
Okay, in the interest of time, and we already did have a couple of folks in the neighborhood on this mention that they are interested in doing this. So
there's 3, remember that.
Okay, and we'll be hearing from more, I'm sure, for the rest of the next few weeks.
Oh,
all right, Sam Mather.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just chiming in quickly. For me, more housing supply, great. Very in favor. I have no strong opinions about ADUs either way, but anything in that direction sounds great.
Great, thank you. Tom?
I mean, I think to speak to the issue of, we're gonna have more people on this space. I mean, I think more housing is going to be built in Cleveland Park in general. We're here on the Red Line, near metro stations and buses. It's a desirable place to live. And I think there's very clearly not enough housing for everybody who wants to be here. I sort of see this as another option as opposed to a triplex or another apartment building next to you. Instead, somebody might have their family member or even a tenant living in one of these small spaces here, rather than putting up a whole bunch of apartment buildings next to your single family home. Honestly, I can almost see that as a buffer to that type of development here. I think we're going to have more housing here. I think, you want to keep character of the neighborhood or something like that. This is probably one softer way to do it. I hear the term gentle density. I think that this would be it.
Okay, thank you. And then Todd, you'll be our last public commenter on this one so that we can move on to our next agenda item. So
sure, and I'll make this really, really quick. I will just say I'm a homeowner here in Cleveland Park, and I would be very interested in building a larger ADU in my backyard. So thanks very much.
Thank you. You're right about being brief. Thank you. Okay. I again put the all ANC at anc3c.org in the chat. We will be, taking edits and comments, and we will, with drafts being iterated, we will post them. We will definitely post in latest and greatest draft when we notice the 3C meeting in the next couple of weeks. So you'll have the opportunity to have a look at that and comment on it too. All right, moving on to our next agenda item.
Wait,
Oh, sorry.
a draft is available online right now, correct?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
And it was linked earlier. Sorry, I can post that again. While Commissioner Siddiqui kicks us off with Historic District.
Well, all right, thanks everyone. So this is the second agenda item. This is, I believe, the second time in this committee we're discussing it. It was initially a very early version of this was brought up back in the fall. And so this is the second time we're discussing it here. And I'm going to paste it in the chat. This is an updated resolution from what's online. Just made some edits based on feedback from different people. And I just, I think for today's purposes, showing this resolution, and then seeing what specific changes we would like to be made to it. Now I'm getting input from the community as well on it. I do want to sort of clarify, and I think for clarification, the best thing is for me to just read the resolved clauses, just so people know what this resolution is about. At the end of the day, this resolution is about collecting more data and incorporating that information whenever decisions about housing are made. So for example, so I'll read the last whereas clause and then I'll read the resolve clauses. So whereas measuring the outcome of public policy is critical to evaluating its success, without data analysis, we do not officially know the racial profiles, incomes, home values, rent, levels of education, health outcomes, and employment, nor do we know the racial equity impact of the district's historic districts, and if they are becoming more white and affluent over time. Be it therefore resolved that ANC3C urges the Office of Planning to incorporate into its development of a racial equity tool data collection and analysis of the racial impact of present and proposed historic districts, and that this information be tracked longitudinally and include such data as racial and ethnic composition, income distribution, property values, rent, levels of education, health outcomes, and employment. Be it further resolved that ANC3C urges the Office of Planning to promote a racial equity assessment for multifamily and commercial applications that come before the Historic Preservation Review Board. Be it further resolved that ANC3C urges the Office of Planning to provide funding to communities and neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. to enable them to research and document their history. Be it further resolved that ANC asks the Council and Ward 3 Councilmember Matthew Fruman to work to fund the aforementioned activities within the Office of Planning. And then be it further resolved, the ANC authorizes the chair and whichever commissioners co-sponsor this with me to represent the commission on this matter. So I guess since Commissioner Paggett, you handed it off to me, I guess I'll see if any committee members have any comments or questions or suggestions that they would like to put forth, and then we can go on to it. All right, Commissioner Nash.
Thanks, Sway. I actually have a question and a comment. The first is, you note that the zoning commission is required to use a racial equity lens, but that's based on the comprehensive plan that has the force of law in DC, as I think a lot of us know. What is the sort of legal basis or statutory basis for what's being requested here? And there's currently no racial equity lens is required either of HPRB applications or for BZA actions. So, what is the statutory basis, and, why not also include the BZA?
I mean, you can include the BZA if you think that's a good idea. I mean, I think the idea is that the Office of Planning has a tool that it's developed, and it does use that tool to incorporate decisions. We're just here in this resolution asking that that it includes the racial impact of present and proposed historic districts when it's evaluating racial equity. That's really the only thing. It would slot in the same place that tool is.
Right, but the currently what the zoning commission does is grounded in law. And then I said I had a separate comment, and I appreciate that you read the resolved clauses, but we've discussed before that the whereas clauses matter as well.
Sure. Well, which one do you have a concern with?
The factual statements on which the resolution relies. And so, there are a number of studies cited in the report, and I went back and and looked at those studies and, ranging from the first article, does preservation accelerate neighborhood change? Looking at the impact in New York City. Again, the finding is, according to the authors, these findings provide very little support for the charge that historic preservation is accelerating racial change in New York City, and showing in particular the share of Black residents doesn't change relative to that of other nearby neighborhoods.
So Commissioner Nash,
can I just finish?
Just want to let you know, so that one wasn't cited for the racial equity, that was cited for the income level. So you can see.
Okay, but again, there are a number of articles that are conflated, and one of them, again, preserving history of the heterogeneous effects of historic districts on local markets, finds in New York that historic designation raised property values, but had led to no racial change. Only within historic districts in Manhattan. The next article, we find no evidence that preservation efforts altered the demographic composition of neighborhoods. Another article dealing with rehabilitation tax credits found no significant changes in racial or housing composition, and in fact found that where RTCs were used, the share of low-income housing households actually went up. So, none of these articles supports the proposition that historic districts, lead to, disparate racial effects. So why are they in here in a resolution that by its terms is to look at historic district demographics through racial equity lens? And I could go on.
So Commissioner Nash, one thing that the resolution does state, and that is the last whereas clause that I read, nor do we know the racial equity impact of the districts, historic districts, and they're becoming more white and affluent over time, right? So one thing, we're not making a point that we know what's happening in DC and what's happening in any historic district in DC. We're actually making the point that we don't know. And so that's I think one important thing. The other thing, Commissioner Nash, if you want to send me specifically which of the articles don't state the stuff that's cited, please do send that to me, because I know that some other people have brought up which aspects were cited and which weren't, and that actually improved the resolution. I changed the language so that I was specifically included what was there and what wasn't there. But as far as if you can look at any of these other quotes, a lot of them are direct quotes from the articles or from presentations. They're directly there and they're accessible. So if all the issues that you outlined, if you wanted to send them to me, which article does say this, doesn't say this, I'm happy to incorporate those edits.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. Commissioner Packets?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we're going to be undertaking the redoing of the comprehensive plan, which is the law, in 2025. And as part of that process, this should be incorporated. Their OP is developing the racial equity action plan, and there is the Office of Racial Equity now. There is a lot of fair amount of criticism during the update of the comprehensive plan process that was in 2021, that these weren't considerations at the time. So, this is an opportune time to have this be part of that process. And I know there's some folks are wondering why it should be district-wide. Absolutely. That's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Packets. Committee Member Goodman.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to ask the question I asked a month ago when this was discussed here. And at least as I read the law, when an application comes before HPRB, which is what all of this is aimed at, they look at the application for something for a new building or a change in an historic district to see whether that's compatible. And that's it. If it's compatible, it's okay. If it's not compatible, it's not okay. They don't consider the kinds of things that you're asking OP to study and to submit to HPRB. So I'm just puzzled what you think this is going to accomplish in the real world. You maybe cause OP to do some work, but HPRB is not allowed to use it.
So the HPRB specific one, for example, that's, so let me actually put into the chat the exact tool so that everyone can see it. So this is the racial equity tool that comes from the DC Zoning Commission. And so they evaluate this part, but within historic districts, and again, like I'll give you all an example of I'll give you an example. For example, even as simple as something simple as when the Uptown nomination landmark status came up. One of the things that the HPRV said was to document the history of Black residents within the Uptown and what was happening over there. That was a part that was included in that, and there was a lot of discussion among the HPRV board members that that part of the history should also be included. And so, one of the things we're asking over here, the specific one we're asking is for multifamily and commercial development, is to incorporate the aspect of racial equity assessments within that as well.
But that's not allowed. That's not allowed.
Right. And so we're asking.
HPRB is not allowed to do that.
Well, okay. So
the zoning commission is, but HPRB isn't. They're two different bodies. Each one has a statute. And the statutes are different. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of they're doing it, but they're not allowed to.
Okay, well, I mean, I think one of the things, at least, that I would like to push is that this get included in there. And then if there's more suggestions on how we can strengthen the language to try and ask for this being allowed, like I'm happy to entertain that as well.
My observation just is that if I were OP and you were asking me to do a lot of work that was going to be useless at the end of the day, I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
And I would go and try to get the statute changed and then coming back and say, OP, okay, now you got to do this. And that's a fine thing. As I said, I'm not opposed to the end result necessarily. I'm just saying
it might be a better pathway. Okay, thank you. Committee member Ward.
Thanks. Yeah, no, just to the point that John was making, I think, so first, decisions before HPRB are supposed to be narrowly cast, but we've all sat through many hearings where lots of things get considered and influence decisions. But you don't know if a policy is having a negative impact. I think everyone can agree that when it comes to historic districts, the positive impacts are self-evident. But unless you're measuring what else is happening, you don't know. And so maybe the data and analysis shows that nothing bad is happening. And so that's one outcome, and then no action's taken. If there is a cost, societal cost to historic districts, then that should inform what the statutes say. And so if it doesn't directly impact HPRB, it should impact the council. OP is going through this process right now. So they're actively planning a racial equity action plan. Historic Preservation Office falls within the Office of Planning. I think what this resolution is fundamentally saying is, while you're doing this now, and the statutory source of why they're doing it is because the mayor said so and the council's funded it, include historic preservation in it. I think that is like the bottom line. And let's find out what the data and analysis says before we jump to conclusions about what to do about it. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Nash, did you want to go again, or should we move to community members?
I think we should move to the community members in the interest.
My hand is still up, so please.
Okay, it's from before. All right, cool. All right, so we will move to community members for comment. And since we are on, just to make sure we get to the exciting topic that's next, I'm gonna time everyone for 90 seconds again. So Ms. Franco, please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Patty Franco, and I live in Commissioner Siddiqui's ANC, and I don't support the resolution in its current form, but I'm concerned about the factual underpinnings and the underlying premise. And I just want to raise something that he had shared, Commissioner Siddiqui had shared in the past, that he's a scientist and supports evidence-based ANC action. So I read the draft carefully. I watched the Brian McKay presentation on historic preservation that was on, I think, on the
8th whereas. And then I read the article, Does Preservation Accelerate Neighborhood Change, which he cites to as his research in minute 40. It does, and then the conclusion that is in whereas paragraph 8 that says to the degree that neighborhoods become less affordable, blah, 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 that conclusion is not supported by the research. And I guess what I am asking is that in fact, in the conclusions of the research show a much more nuanced situation, and that there's no change in reported rents and there's little evidence of racial turnover. And I would urge us to read the studies, cite the studies, and not some PowerPoint bullet that is not supported by the studies. And I'm happy to, I think Rick Nash also mentioned the study, but I really suggest that any resolutions that have the underpinnings of studies and the whereas clauses that the conclusory statements, it's important they be complete and accurate, and they should, and any resolution should be predicated on complete and robust evidence. And that when I spent a couple hours doing that, I'm really troubled. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Franco. So one thing I encourage you to do, which I encourage Commissioner Nash, and I actually encourage you to email all@anc3c.org so all the commissioners can see it. Please do send me all the places where there are inaccuracies.
Okay.
And I actually welcome more whereas additions of the nuances that you're saying. So the nuances that you would like to add, please send that text as well. I'm more than happy.
Okay. It's not a nuance. Is it complete inaccuracy in what's now paragraph?
Then please send me the inaccuracy and I'm happy to correct it. I will respond to everything just as I have before.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Hi, I also live in Mr. Siddiqui's area, and I'm slightly appalled at this particular proposal, because I have worked for 20 years on community reinvestment, and I worked closely with Empower DC during the comprehensive plan, only to have them call the proposals of the Coalition for Smarter Growth just another noise from the Bozzuto bill crowd. And the thought that the Bozzuto bill crowd is influencing our ANC now is slightly appalling. You may remember when, during the comprehensive plan discussions, Empower DC, and frankly, the Black community of DC, chided Mary Che, whom they called the developer's tool, for what they found as offensive comments on the comprehensive plan. Their criticism was that DC and the comprehensive plan in particular care only about build, 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 which developers' friends like Mary Che support. And to think that our ANC is following that path is appalling. You may remember during the comprehensive plan debate that what the Empower DC and the Black community wanted was for racial equity to be included in the comprehensive plan in this way. More credit for historic preservation, clear preservation of Berry Farm and support for it.
So Ms. Kennedy, we're at 90 seconds now. Thank you. I just want to clarify that Coalition for Smarter Growth is not cited in this resolution at all.
But in the earlier one.
This was
I also just want to point out that please do not make these kinds of, accusations in the future without any kind of basis in fact, because they're not true.
Ms. Lepard?
Thank you. The commissioners have all received a letter from the Cleveland Park Historical Society Board of Directors, so I don't really need to repeat that, other than to say that this right now, the way it reads, the resolution, there's no support for it. The whereas clauses, as Patty Franco has pointed out, are unsupported by the research that supposedly they're attached to. So the whereas clauses don't align with what they're purported to be in the research that is cited, the authors that are cited. And I also just wanted to say that as John Goodman has said, right now, this is not the only place that this is required under the DC law, under the comprehensive plan, regardless of Ms. Peggett's thinking it's going to be wildly changed in a couple of years, is that this is done at the zoning commission level, and it isn't of the purvey of the Historic Preservation Review Board. And I guess you want to change all of that without sort of the need or the relevance or the importance. I mean, historic districts is, as actually we can show you a lot of different proof. Making a historic district doesn't make it unaffordable. It doesn't change the, it doesn't lead to segregation and marginalization, as you've said in your earlier drafts. And so I don't understand the reason or the premise for this when I think you're misconstruing what historic districts and historic preservation are all about. And one last thing is, when you mentioned the Uptown Theater, one of at the hearing when the board overwhelmingly unanimously supported the landmarking of the Uptown to be a historical landmark in and of itself, not just in the district. They were curious about whether there had been desegregation at the Uptown and could they show proof of that. It wasn't about whether Black residents in Cleveland Park were left out specifically because, and obviously Cleveland Park wasn't a historic district until 1987, long after, you know, they did away with segregation across the city.
So Ms. Lepard, we're after 90 seconds. I let you go because you were talking about the Uptown, but
well, okay. One last thing is that when they did find it, they just said that there's no direct evidence, but they assumed that there was segregation because other theaters are segregated. Thank you.
Bar, did you want to go very quickly, because we do have to move on to the last item, which I'm sure everyone really wants us to talk about.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. I guess it's really more a question for the commission, I guess, than anything else, sort of a comment. It's not a CPCA view. We don't have a view at this point, but the question is just to clarify why the commission sees value in pursuing this. I mean, I think most people moving into the neighborhood know it's in a historic district. A lot of people find value in that in terms of real, investment certainty, et cetera. And I think there's a signal from our ANC, sort of requesting research on sort of, negative implications of historic district status. I'm just curious why the ANC is inclined to do that.
So I guess I can answer that. And for me, I don't think this should be looked at as a negative thing for historic districts. We're asking for more data collection. For me, the first thing about this is racial equity and racial makeup of our neighborhood, right? Like if you look at our neighborhood, we're way whiter than any other part of DC. There are many reasons for that. Housing costs are part of that. I would say transportation policy is part of that. All other policies are part of that. And I think we should be looking at all of them for that aspect. And so I think in this case, particular, it might be seen as like putting an eye on historic districts. Well, yes, like there is an idea to collect more data on this. We are not making a statement that this is an impact or anything else, but we are making a statement that we would like more information on it. So yeah, Bart, it's all about more information. I actually think if what Ms. Lepard is saying is true and what Ms. Franco is saying is true, what comes out of this is data is collected and it shows that it has no impact. And wouldn't that be a win for the Cleveland Park Historic District? So either way, if you assume that the outcomes are not bad, then let's collect the data and let's see what comes out of it. That's all this resolution is saying.
Thanks a lot.
All right, Commissioner Packett, sorry that took longer than you probably wanted, but you can move on.
Yeah, just to let folks know, since we don't have the hard stop at 7:30, we're going to let this go on until hopefully about 7:45. 7:50 to capture comments on the beginning of the discussion of the future of the Cleveland Park service lane. We do not have a resolution on this yet, but we've been hearing from a lot. It's probably the hottest topic in the neighborhood of residents, visitors to the area, and businesses up on the Cleveland Park Strip regarding, when this construction is done on that strip, what's going to come of it. And I just wanted to briefly show everyone a few slides from the kickoff meeting that happened last year on this. This has been in the works for a very, very long time. It is the most studied 26 parking spaces, I believe, ever in the history of the world. So can you all see my slides or my screen? Sorry. Anyone?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is the project overview. Again, its main objective was to fix the flooding problem. And while doing that, also take on, some other sidewalk maintenance concerns and ADA upgrades, which is essentially what the raising of the service lane to be level with the rest of the sidewalk was. Now, the service lane wasn't always in existence. It was built in the 1960s. The sidewalk had previously matched its historic sister across the street, with a wide parkway for parking of the public, not including vehicles at that time. So the proposed condition, this is obviously the existing, was a shared use area, raising the service lane, ADA upgrades, and adding more trees, hopefully, and this bollard system that was kind of dividing where the main people walking area versus the main, and I don't want to call it a travel lane because it is not a lane of travel for cars. It never was, nor should it ever be. So even though it says it here. But yeah, shared use area. This is the Ordway intersection that's going to have cars go out onto Connecticut if cars return, rather than have that jostly effect at that intersection. We can see there's more seating areas, planters, bike racks. This is on the uptown side, which you can already see is completed for the most part. So the discussion at hand is because of the changes that have been made, and the way that the service lane has been used for the past 2.5 years. This was always planned with it having the potential of being closed to cars for certain periods of time. With that being said, it is up to the mayor's office as to whether or not it remains that way, or if it's partially open during certain hours for the streeteries to continue, which have been incredibly successful. And I believe, the Femme Fatale fairs and the farmers market that's hoping to move across the street. So this is to open up a discussion amongst the community members to gather thoughts so that we can have, an informed resolution to have input on the future of the use of this lane and this public space. So with that, I will open it up to comments from the committee members and commissioners first, if you want to raise your hands. And again, let's try and get to everyone. Tom.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, I think the past few weeks has been really eye-opening on this issue. If you've been down there at all, if you've been down there with the construction, everything, where we had the service lane a few months ago, I walk through it all the time at the farmers market in there and all this and that. But you walk through it now and it feels so narrow. I was down there today for grabbing some stuff on lunch break and trying to get past people. Just getting around there was really, really tough with the really narrow sidewalks there. And personally, I wouldn't feel very comfortable as someone walking down there, walking in a, sort of shared space with cars that are going to be traveling through there. They are going to be traveling through there. They're going to be coming in and out. They're going to be parking. That just doesn't feel very safe to me. And I think if you spend any time down there around now, it's pretty clear that it's not a very feasible solution for pedestrians, people with strollers, people in wheelchairs, et cetera.
Thank you. Hayden.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Pagets. Yeah, I just want to say briefly, it's almost a very symbolic timing that the construction has taken place. At the end of last month, DC's COVID centers all closed down. And, the service lane, it's a question mark, right? And this is a moment where we're saying, okay, we had this time period, this pandemic, where we said we're going to reimagine how we do things. We're going to reconsider our priorities and how we live and how we prioritize space and who it's for. And the longest lasting part of that, more than any, stimulus program, was this infrastructure, was this outdoor dining that was taken advantage of by the community. And I think that we should keep this because it's something that everyone enjoys. That's all.
Great. Thank you. Adam.
I'm going to echo Hayden's comments. I was at the Nationals game this weekend and they shut down Half Street by Nationals Park, and it just makes it like a more enjoyable experience to be walking in an area that people are trying in mass to get places. And I think with the metro right there and all the restaurants on that strip, people still don't feel comfortable eating inside for whatever reason. People don't want to be eating inside because it's starting to be very nice out. So I don't see a reason to deny people a pleasurable outdoor experience.
Thank you. Swale.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, commissioners. I mean, I think I do agree with everything that's been said. I think creating public spaces for people, I think, is very valuable. Creating places where people can congregate, people can hang out, people can meet, like third spaces where everyone is, and like safer spaces, that they're all very good. I will temper my comments a little bit, because I do think that there is, there's the desire for us to have space, and and I went back and counted all the emails of everyone living in ANC 3C. 92% requested that it be closed to cars all the time. And then there was another sort of 4 or 5% that said, there could be a medium use, and another sort of, 4 or 5% that said that it needs to be open to cars all the time. And again, we're still going to get emails, and we're still going to get like more opinions. And as we continue to talk about this, I'm not saying we make a decision based on that. But the one thing I will say though, is I think there might be a way that we can do this so that we get the space we need, and that we also make sure that our businesses are doing okay. And I know two business owners are here. Kristen is here from the Exercise Coach, and Bobby's here from CP Ballet. So if they want to speak up, it'd be great to hear from their perspective as well. One idea that I was, for example, was talking about, for over the last year when we're thinking about the service lane is, well, what if we kept it closed to cars on evenings and weekends? That's the most of the time where families are there, most of the time where a lot of people congregate. During the workday, especially when certain businesses might need more vehicles to get pickup and drop off, there could be an opportunity to have some type of parking there. Of course, then it's very difficult in terms of, I do understand all the difficulties associated with a hybrid model as well. Like there's difficulties of restaurants moving their furniture, and also just in danger of stuff like that. But I think that regardless what we decide to do, I think there's definite need for having sort of a sort of place where people can congregate. But also there's other ways of solving some of the parking and pickup drop-off problems. I think like the parking right off Macomb side, for example, like getting a pickup drop-off over there, I think that would be very useful, just to get something close to the lane, and other things like that. So yeah.
Okay. Godwin.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm really happy we're having this conversation, and I just a couple points to make. Like Commissioner Siddiqui, I've been getting feedback from my constituents and also from other members of the community. They're pretty heavily in favor of keeping it pedestrianized, which is my personal preference, although I'm not ideological about it. And I think we should, number one, give a full hearing to different views about this, and also make an effort to do more outreach among our community about this issue. I do want to say that I think, and I don't really know how to manage this, but I do think that the coming bike lanes should be considered as part of the decision making on this. And the whole traffic pattern in that little commercial district, I think, is going to be changed with parking and bikes and the plaza there. And so it would, ideally we would be doing it all at once, or as a single piece rather than in parts, which may contradict each other. So I just raise that as a bit of a concern. I'm again, my personal preference is to keep it pedestrianized, but I would like to hear more from other people, and I also would like to at least think about how the bike lanes fit in.
Sure. Well, just to note, the bike lanes, the construction doesn't start till 2025. So this has potential immediate impacts. Do any other committee members or commissioners want to speak up? Okay, we'll move it over to the community. And I know Patrick from Nannies is on, and his earphones are going to die, so I'm going to let him go first. So Patrick, thank you.
Hey guys, yeah, happy to be partaking in this. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, just based on when I got wind of talking to the project manager for the construction, he gave me an idea that it was sort of in sway. And so about last Thursday, I went and talked to a number of the restaurant businesses, Sababa, Spices, Atomic, and Manny's is included in that. And we are all strongly in support of not bringing the car lane back. We would love to have it be a restaurantery. And I also have my own feelings on, the ability for the other businesses to get access when there's not construction going on down on this lane. That service lane tended to be a problem. You would have Uber Eats drivers just getting out of their car and leaving their car just right there and walking away from it. So I feel like it's almost more accessible for a lot of these businesses without having that service lane in there. And on top of that, the business you could create for Sababa, Spices, Manny's, not to be too biased, but there's just such a possibility there. And I think Cleveland Park could become such a destination if we did this correctly and we dealt with it. We've got the zoo right there. You have so many good businesses, and this is a block of mom and pop businesses. These are, tiny businesses. This isn't Clyde's. This isn't Cheesecake Factory. These are independent businesses, and I guess I'm just a little disappointed that we're trying to support a fucking service lane. Sorry for my cursing, but over supporting these tiny businesses. It's just it drives me kind of crazy. And I'm just a manager. I'm not an owner. I'm not making money off of this. But I'm on this block more than anybody. I'm on this block at least 6 days a week. I talk to people that are not coming into my business, and none of them understand why we want to bring the car lane back. It doesn't make sense. If the pandemic has shown anything, it's shown.
We're gonna have to have you wrap it up.
Sorry. If anything has shown how beautiful it's to have that up for the pedestrian traffic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, Jen.
I hope I'm not too close here. The issue is with the service lane is that it is hurting the businesses. And it is hurting the businesses that actually pay for outdoor seating. When some of the other businesses get it for free, then the ones who are paying for it don't get that. And it's hard when there isn't the ability for the other businesses to get customers. I like the idea of having space, and I like the idea of open space, but I also like the idea of having the businesses that I care about here. And it's difficult to say, let's support a couple of the businesses at the expense of the others when they are struggling with not having the ability to have parking. We still have people who will walk here, but the amount of people who come to the area by car has decreased. And I think that that's partially because there isn't parking. So I'd like a hybrid system if possible, but we do need to incorporate having people who come to the business district at park.
Okay, thank you. Bar.
Okay, it's my last comment for the night. Thank you. So three things. First, I think it's obviously absolutely critical to understand the implications for the business strip of whatever we do. And I don't have the data on that. I assume Cassandra's gathering it and can share it. And I know she's already provided information to DDOT about loading and unloading on that strip for the redesign, for example. That seems critical. Second issue, just FYI, although we don't have a view yet, we're definitely going to reach out to our membership to get views on this. So I appreciate the time that you're providing to enable that kind of engagement. I'm sure views will be at least mixed on that in terms of what you've been hearing so far. Third thing is this is something that was agreed upon a long time ago with a lot of consideration that there would be parking coming back for a reason. So just even leaving aside the additional data we can gather, the analysis was done. I realize the world has changed a bit post-COVID, but the other businesses that don't have outdoor seating, haven't changed. And I think it's really important if we're going to consider new factors, as Gawain was saying, to take into account the implications of the redesign and how that actually plays out. It's one thing to talk about, as you were saying, Janelle, perhaps what would make sense between now and 2025, assuming, for example, that there'll still be parking on the avenue in the interim on the east side. But once that's gone, we've never seen that before, except for situations like this where there's construction going on. So the impacts of it, I think, are completely unknown, and we need to take that into account before taking a long-term view, I think. Thanks very much.
Sure. Cassandra.
Thank you. I think that if the lane is closed permanently to traffic, then we need to really pay attention to what is happening in the alley behind those businesses, because you're going to have more of the Uber Eats drivers back there. You're going to have more deliveries back there. And I get very nervous with people walking through the alley and you've got it coming in both directions. So I'm wondering, I don't know if it's something the ANC can do, but ask if that alley can be one way, if it's even possible. So yeah, just wanted to bear in mind that what's going to happen behind that strip is really going to increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy.
I'm on the other end of the spectrum from most of the people on this call, I think, and that I'm in my upper 70s and somewhat limited mobility. And I've always said, and I'll reiterate, that I can't shop where I can't park. And I'm in Woodley Park, and I frequently go to Cleveland Park, just today even, to the bank and the post office and the library. And I've joined, I have a membership at Orange Theory. I have a lot of reasons to be in Cleveland Park pretty often. And it's possible for me to walk up there, but then, I mean, that's my day, really. So, I'm just going to be forced, if I can't reasonably park. And generally, I've been fortunate because I have a flexible schedule, been able to go when I can park, even if it's around the block. And also about the street areas, I don't see that, eating under a plastic tent is really dining al fresco. And when you are al fresco there, sitting by the curb where there's bus exhaust and cars and noise and traffic going by, just does not seem to me to make for a very pleasant dining experience, Try a, mountain lake or something.
Okay.
So there's a lot of idealism and dreaming here, I think, of all the different things that can be there in Cleveland Park for everybody.
Okay.
But
Thank
certainly
you.
the seniors know it's not easy.
Thank you.
All right.
Layla.
Thank you. Just so that folks know, when I was ANC commissioner back in 2009 and 2010, I had talked with DDOT about a shared road experience. I had seen it for the first time in Oregon, and it seemed to work really well. There's also a shared road in Silver Spring. And I think to Bar's point that this was part of the agreement, was to retain some of the parking, but also to address some of the safety issues, the narrow sidewalk issues. And I don't think we need to dump the service lane all at once. I think it would behoove us to understand how it's being used. Is it safe? Does it work? This is a finite resource by a lot of people with a lot of interest, those that need the parking to access our stores. I'm hearing a lot about restaurants needing the space for al fresco dining, but what about the other stores that need the parking? And so balancing these issues, balancing these interests, I think is important. The design is already in. They're working on a shared road, and to dump it now without benefit of understanding how it would play out, I think doesn't do us well. Also, we need to get folks used to the idea of a shared road. And once we lose the parking on Connecticut for the bikes, then the parking that's going to be on the shared road is going to become even more crucial, or we're just going to be a restaurant strip. And then those of us
Leila, we are
live
at
in the
90
neighborhood-
seconds.
Okay, thanks. Those of us who live in the neighborhood, you know, won't have community serving businesses anymore. Thanks.
Kirsten.
Hi, yeah, I mean, I'm torn because I love pedestrian areas, but I am a business owner here, and my whole team, we hear way too often, we're a fitness studio and we are by appointment, and we do initial consultations, and how many of them call us from the car and say, can't find parking, no, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not going to do it. We hear that more than we'd like to hear that. And I am a patron of these streeteries and I love them, but we definitely find it to be the parking to be a real challenge. And yeah, ultimately, if that biking lane turns into no parking as well, we're really squeezed. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Lynn?
I'll try and be really quick. I noticed from the 3 conversations that we would not deal with the outlying pictures. I would almost say, especially for this last issue, that when I worked in construction, what we would do would hire professionals who would walk us through these different, get all the right people, the different business owners, all the right people, the residents at the table, so that you plan out and think through the different issues, and then you come to compromises and decisions, and you have a direction forward. So I love what we're saying, but we don't really have a professional that's walking us through and say, well, if you do this, this is this. What are the most important elements? It makes you think of the final product and walk you back, so that are you getting what it is that you think you're wanting to get? And just as a point, what this woman was saying from the exercise fitness, well, CVS may leave in 2025 when their lease is up, because parking, the number of people in there, and the raising of the rent. So I'm a resident of this community. We need the variety of what this neighborhood offers. And quite frankly, the parking is horrendous. It's not just for the businesses. We get the zoo people coming, the visitors. So I live on Ordway. And if you try to take Macomb, then that isn't going to work either, especially when the Ordway part.
So Ms. Ellington, we're at 90 seconds. So if you could wrap up.
Yeah. No, the wrap up is work with professionals, charrettes, who will walk you through it, who are designers, urban designers, who can then think, what is the future bringing?
Thank you. Max.
Sorry, thanks. So I just wanted to bring up one thing that is more important to us about I don't know why she's blurred, about the service lane closure, which is, it is much safer to walk on the other side right now. And so we therefore spend a lot of time on the other side. And don't get me wrong, I love Byblos, but like if we're walking to the zoo, for example, we deliberately stay all the way on the other side until the library, because it is not safe when to be on the other side. Now it's great we're bringing up the shared road, but with all the I just can't trust that the cars and people driving there are going to be there in a way that is safe and we're going to squeeze back on that small little sidewalk as it used to be, and we're going to have no benefit from all the work that's gone into this. So particularly at times when we have a lot of people going around and whatever that may be, I think it's from a safety perspective, it would benefit us to be able to walking comfortably with a stroller instead of being worried about getting run over. Obviously we like the outdoor eateries and all of that stuff, but for us, the safety piece of it in our neighborhood is important. So thanks.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Abigail and then Tom, you're next. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, let me get my camera set so you can see me. Hi, I just wanted to say, I'm somebody in the neighborhood who doesn't have a car. So I basically have to walk everywhere. I take public transportation or Uber. So, I mean, I'm kind of in favor of having restaurants in the area where they're easily accessible for people who are pedestrians rather than having to go downtown or somewhere else. And I think having more outdoor seating and space makes it a more desirable neighborhood to eat out in. I mean, I have to say right now, I oftentimes wouldn't go down there because I don't find it very pleasant. And I think that if you upgraded the sidewalk and had it be wider and more of a flexible space, that would actually probably make it a more appealing place for people to think about dining out. I mean, I do get the parking concerns that some people have, but there are also a lot of people in the neighborhood who don't drive or who, take Ubers and stuff like that. So there's also the big parking lot right nearby. So I think, I think it would help the neighborhood a lot if there was sort of a better space for people to be outside during the summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to speak briefly on the hybrid plan that's been brought up a few times, and I really worry about it, honestly. It worries me a lot because, I've heard about businesses having a lot of issues putting up and taking down their outdoor seating. I think it was Annie O'Brien's had some issue when the construction came up. It was really difficult for them to find places to put their stuff. I can't imagine them having to do that every day at 5 p.m. or on weekends, having to tear down. I've got some awesome benches out there. I'm headed there actually after this. It would be really difficult for them after they've invested all this money and time into building the space that a lot of people go there for, I think, especially with outdoor dining being such a big deal these days with pandemic. To have to do this every day. So I really worry about that. And also it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We're talking about cars, we're talking about people coming to the neighborhood. Are they going to be coming to the neighborhood not after 5 p.m.? Are we going to open it up to cars during this time when there's maybe like less business in the neighborhood? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And so I think it doesn't make sense to open it up to cars during these few hours of the day. I walked down there for lunch today during my lunch break, and I can imagine not being able to walk in that space comfortably and safely during that time. I mean, business owners already talk about how they struggle with getting people down there, during the day and such like this. Are we going to close that off from pedestrians during that time? It seems really weird to me. It doesn't even make a lot of sense.
Thank you. And again, this is just the beginning of this conversation. Bob, you had a hand up.
Something that Commissioner Siddiqui mentioned earlier. I mean, there is a pretty intensive planning process going on for the redesign of Connecticut Avenue. And yes, it includes bike lanes, but I think more importantly and relevant to this is that it's really taking a very fine grained look at, curb utilization and loading, which is obviously a primary importance for a lot of the businesses there, not just, customer parking, but, to get Streets and Yes and CVS, get the products into the store, they need that. And so that's happening now. This conversation happened a decade ago. Can you believe it was a decade ago when the whole service lane fight happened? At that time, there was a lot of recommendations about doing parking management here that never happened, but it's happening now. So I think that while there'll be fewer spaces, the allocated use of those spaces and hopefully the time limits that are put on them will really, make a difference, particularly in the way our, the businesses have evolved with, pick up and drop off being a huge piece of businesses. And I think in terms of the streeteries, which have been great. We've already heard that there was a number of streeteries that didn't do something because of the temporary nature, and they weren't sure if they should or shouldn't. What's the future going to be? We've talked to, heard about the sitting underneath the tent. A closed lane will actually provide an opportunity for some creative and attractive cafe spaces there that we haven't seen yet. And I think that is something that can really be a shot in the arm for the commercial area. I'm definitely on the side of keeping this closed, but also, when the next iteration of the Connecticut Avenue design comes out, we really look at what are the needs that we need to meet for the businesses, for the pickup and drop off, and for the loading primarily.
Great, thank you. This is the last call for this session of this meeting. I'm seeing no hands and no other additional comments. So thank you very much. I saw Swally just put in the chat that we have a number of more opportunities where we'll be talking about this before our May public meeting. So stay tuned, join in, and thank you all very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings. Have a good
Thank you, Commissioner Pagets.